Foul is Fair, Chapter 19, City in Irons. The girls stood, staring into the open gateway. The wind continued to blow through the wrought iron bars, but now it was more like a howl than a tuneful hum as it passed through the open gate. The city was no less forbidding with the gate open, just more colorful. Had she not known better, Megan would have thought it abandoned for a few years at most. All over the place, there were faded paints or partial images that had to have once been bright and cheerful, and maybe a little garish. The buildings even seemed to have few sharp edges and unusual contours and layouts. The only thing close, she realized, was the architecture of a lot of modern concert halls, laid out to produce the best acoustics possible. It was like the entire place had been built to house one great spectacle of sight and sound. Now, all of that crazed precision left the wind echoing through every curve and twist, the whispers and howls echoing back through the streets. Megan exchanged a look with Lonnie, both hesitating to push on and step across the threshold into the lost city of iron. As usual, Aisling started on ahead of them. As the Count started to glide into the city, Aisling shuddered. The Count, noticing, reversed course back through the gates and landed on the ground. "Count, don't be such a sissy," Aisling hissed through clenched teeth clinging to the bird's neck. "We have a job to do." "Caw!" the Count replied. "What? Don't be ridiculous. I'm fine. I will be fine." "Caw!" "Yes, they do." "Caw!" "He really, really is." There was a pause and then a final "caw." "Thank you. It's all okay. Honest. Just don't brush into anything." Then she visibly tensed further as the crow flew back into the city. "He who?" Megan asked. "Huh?" Aisling looked at her suddenly. "The unseelie king, Oh, yeah. You don't speak Corvid." "Nope. So what about my dad?" "We were just mentioning him. Because of the job. You know, my cousin Nessa once said..." She once said. Aisling was breathing a little heavier, eyes glancing back to the gates and on to the next iron-wrapped building. Finally, Aisling looked at Megan in the eye for a moment. "Well, Nessa and I don't really talk anymore. The king and I do. This is worth it." "I'm sorry," Megan said, as she stepped into the city, following the crow and Pixie. "Are you going to be okay in here?" "I'll be fine," Aisling said, not sounding very convincing as she huddled over more, making sure she had a good grip on the Count. Even so, they flew on. Some distance into the city, Megan paused. "Did you hear that?" "How are you hearing anything over the wind?" Lonnie asked, but paused to listen even so. After a few moments of the wind's howl, Megan was just starting to think she might have imagined the sound when it came again. A dull sound of metal and stone that echoed through the corridors, then disappeared into the constant sound around them. "Are you sure there's no one here?" Megan finally asked. "No one ever said that," Lonnie responded, looking around through the different passages through the city, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from when it echoed again. "Something keeps preventing people from coming back, after all." "You're very reassuring." Lonnie grabbed hold of Megan's arm, tugging her toward one of the buildings. "I'll keep being reassuring over here, then, away from any of the side streets and alleys." Aisling and the Count circled higher, surveying the city from the rooftop level, before they finally dove towards Lonnie, landing on her shoulder. "Incoming!" "Incoming what?" Megan said, glancing all around. "I think it might be a giant," Aisling said, focusing on one of the side alleys across the street from them, drawing the girls' attention there. "I thought there were no more giants," said Megan. "Tell him," Aisling said, the crow lifting off as a massive form, at least 9 feet tall, tromped into the streets, each footfall echoing through the city. As it emerged from the shadows of the alley into the dim light of the open street, Megan could see that the figure seemed to be made of the same black iron as the gates. Though the construction was frequently somewhat rough compared to most statues she had seen, the figure still seemed to be made up of a loose interpretation of an armored soldier, down to the sword and shield bearing an insignia of a rearing horse, permanently attached to the arms. Megan froze where she was, trying not to draw attention to her way, hoping the creature would turn. For a moment, it appeared about to do so. Then its gaze fell on the small group. At first, Megan expected it to come running, but instead, it stood tall and tipped its head back. Though its mouth didn't move, the sound that emerged from the statue sounded somewhere between a bellow and a car crash. The sound echoed far louder than its footfalls had, easily carrying over the wind. All around them, the city started to come alive with new noises. More of the metal-on-stone footfalls came from all directions. "Run!" Aisling shouted. The Count lifted off of Lanny's shoulder, leading the way. Once the shout shocked both girls out of staring, they raced for one of the side streets. Hearing crashing behind them, Megan looked back to see the giant statue following, keeping pace with them due to long strides, maybe even gaining a little. They rounded 2 more corners trying to lose it and almost ran directly into another, this one with a mountain on its shield. The Count abruptly swooped upward as the towering form turned a corner just ahead of them. Lonnie dove to the side to avoid a swipe from its sword. Megan wasn't as agile or lucky, only barely managing to slow down as she collided with a tree-trunk-thick leg of iron. She stumbled backwards, barely keeping her feet. Looking back up, she saw the black sword raising. Before it could swing, a tiny black form ridden by a much more colorful one raked past its eyes. The crow's claws didn't do anything to the statue, but the pair got its attention. The shield came up as the Count was banking upward, the edge smashing into the bird and drawing a scream from Aisling. The crow went into a spin, flapping desperately and trying to regain the skies, while Aisling clung on for dear life. Lonnie dove, managing to catch them before they hit the ground, though the Count's claws or beak drew a long, bloody gash on her hand and arm as she did. The heroism did buy Megan time to recover. She helped pull Lonnie to her feet, and the girls started running again, with Lonnie holding onto the smaller pair. There were 4 more close calls, each new encounter sending them racing down a different alley or side path. Megan paused a few times, looking for signs of anywhere to hide, but all of the doors were chained and the windows boarded. She never had time to look for long, or truly test any of them, with iron footfalls always sounding like they were just behind them, along with the bellow crashes that kept announcing their presence anytime a new thing found them. Finally, as she was racing around the corner, almost out of breath, Lonnie grabbed her, pulling her to the side. "Over here." Where Lonnie pointed, there was a window, once shuttered and boarded up like the others, but this one appeared to have been smashed open. Megan scrambled up into the window and into the building, then accepted Aisling and the Count. As soon as she was able to set the pair down, she reached into the street to help pull her shorter friend in through the window. Neither dared peek out, but they heard the crashing footsteps in the street outside. For a few moments, it stilled, though there were a few more footfalls out there, still coming their way. They held their breath, waiting to see if the thing would see their hiding spot and come crashing through the door or wall. Then the footfalls moved on. A few more came through the area, and each time they moved on. Finally, Megan dared to break the silence. "What are those things?" "Iron golems," came a voice from the other side of the room. "The invulnerable guards of the city."